Sex! The first thing that comes to mind whenever we hear the word sex is penis and vagina, which are the most known parts of the human reproductive system. It is made up of organs involved in reproduction. Unlike other organ systems that are mostly concerned about protecting our bodies, the human reproductive system's main concern is to ensure our genes get passed on for the survival of our species. However, as simple as it is, the human reproductive system is complex, and we will uncover concepts to understand the complexity that ensures the survival of the human species. The reproductive system performs four main functions. First, production of gametes, sperm cells in the testes of males and egg cells in the ovaries of females. Second, fertilization, or the process of fertilizing an egg cell with a sperm cell to form a zygote. Third is the development and nourishment of a new individual, where the female reproductive system nurtures the developing offspring from birth and after. And lastly, the production of reproductive hormones, which controls the development of the gender-specified body form. For a better understanding how reproduction really works, we first need to know how gametes are produced. The testes in males and ovaries in females produce gametes or sex cells. As the name implies, it is an organism's reproductive cells. The formation of gametes in males and females occurs by a type of cell division called meiosis. Meiosis is a process where a single cell undergoes two consecutive cell divisions to produce four daughter cells. These cells are our sex cells, sperm in males and egg in females. The two divisions of meiosis are called meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. Like mitosis, each division of meiosis has prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Before meiosis begins, all chromosomes are duplicated. In the early prophase 1, the duplicated chromosomes become visible chromatids. Then, the chromosomes align as pairs in a process called synapsis. Crossing over also occurs at this stage that allows the exchange of genetic materials between chromosomes. Next is metaphase 1, where pairs of chromosomes align along the center of the cell. And then, the pairs of chromosomes are separated to each side of the cell in the anaphase 1. When meiosis 1 is complete, new nuclei form and the cell divides. Each now has two sets of half the chromosomes. Meanwhile, meiosis 2 repeats the entire process, now producing four haploid cells. However, the difference is there is no DNA replication unlike in meiosis 1. Now, how do all of these work? What makes the said organs, anatomical structures, and features conceive life on this planet? The male reproductive system. We usually associate foods like eggplant or banana when we hear about the male's genitalia. Why? Because look. Oops! What was that? Don't worry, it is just the male's copulatory organ, which is just as natural as any other body part. So, there is no need to feel uncomfortable because you'll learn a lot about yourself as we get through this video. The primary purpose of this system is to produce, deliver, and nourish the sperm towards the genitalia's exterior or the female genitalia for fertilization. Inside the testes, the male gametes are produced. It may seem vulnerable to injury since it is outside the abdominal cavity, but it is just an ideal location for the production of sperm, maintaining 3 degrees Celsius below normal body temperature. The testis is composed of the tunica albuginea, the septum, the lobules on which seminiferous tubules reside connecting to a straight tubule, and finally, the rete testis. The tunica albuginea surrounds each testis and extends inward to form the septa that partition the organ into lobules. These lobules are composed of highly coiled seminiferous tubules, and interstitial cells between them produce testosterone, triggered by the luteinizing hormone. Testosterone is the hormone responsible for the secondary male characteristics. Spermatogenesis occurs inside these seminiferous tubules through the aid of the follicle-stimulating hormone, starting in puberty throughout the lifetime of a male. It follows meiotic cell division as discussed before. Immature spermatogenea residing in the periphery of the tubule develops into spermatocytes in the lumen, and eventually, these spermatocytes turn into 4 spermatids. Then, spermiogenesis occurs, which mature the spermatids to spermatozoa or the sperm. And even though the sperm has not gained its motility and fertilizing ability inside the testis, it will complete its maturation in the epididymis. The matured sperm has a head, which is the nuclear region, with its tip covered by an acrosome helping the sperm penetrate the female ovum, a midpiece that contains mitochondria as the energy factory, and a flagellum tail serving for locomotion. And that is how the sperm is produced. So, how are sperms delivered and nourished? It is the function of the secondary sex organs. Together, the duct system, composed of the epididymis, ductus or vas deferens, ejaculatory duct, and the urethra, and the accessory glands composed of the seminal vesicles, prostate, and bulbourethral gland build up the secondary sex organs. The epididymis is a comma-shaped organ. As mentioned, it is where the sperm goes to after leaving the testis. It is also its storage before ejaculation, where the final stage of maturation occurs. Continuous from it is the ductus or vas deferens, a long fibromuscular tube ending with an enlarged ampulla. It is where the sperm is propelled during orgasm by the work of its thick layer of smooth muscles creating peristaltic waves. It is a component of the spermatic cord containing vascular and neural structures supplying the testis. Just after the vas deferens ampulla is the ejaculatory duct, where the sperm is supplied with nourishment from the accessory glands. Lastly, the urethra. It extends from the urinary bladder towards the external urethral orifice at the tip of the penis. Because the sphincter contracts when reproductive fluids are passing through, it keeps urine from entering the urethra. It is divided into 3 regions: the prostatic, the membranous, and the penile urethra. Now, to ensure its survival along the way, the accessory glands are in action. The seminal fluid, or the mixture of all the secretions from the said accessory glands, is composed of 60% fluids from the seminal vesicles, while the remainder is from the prostate. The sperm and secretions from the bulbourethral glands contribute to only a small volume. The seminal vesicles next to the ampulla provide viscous fluid containing fructose as an energy source for the sperm, prostaglandins for the sperm's mobility and viability, proteins that cause coagulation reactions, and vitamins to immunize the seminal fluid. Prostate gland encircling the urethra has a milky-colored alkaline secretion that contributes to motility. It is known for having inflammation, infection, and the third most prevalent cancer in men. Lastly, the bulbourethral gland near the base of the penis secretes an alkaline mucus-like fluid in response to sexual stimulation, neutralizing urethral and vaginal acidity due to urine, and lubricates the tip of the penis during intercourse. In a single ejaculation, seminal fluid's volume ranges from 1.5 to 6 ml, containing 50 to 150 million sperm per ml. Sperm count below 20 million usually presents a fertility problem. Yes, only one sperm can penetrate and fertilize the ovum, but it takes several millions of sperm to ensure that it will take place. Those are the internal organs of the system. The external genitalia, the last that we are going to discuss, is composed of the scrotum and the penis. The reason why the male sexual organ is associated with the said foods. The scrotum is the sac holding each testis, divided by a vertical septum. It contains the dartos muscle giving the scrotum its wrinkled appearance, that is, when relaxed, is smooth. It also contains the cremaster muscle consisting of skeletal muscle fibers controlling the position of the scrotum and testis. When it is cold or the man is sexually aroused, this muscle contracts to pull the testes closer to the body for warmth. And lastly, the most known organ of the male reproductive system, the penis. It transfers the sperm to the vagina. It is composed of 3 columns of erectile tissue. The pair of dorsal corpora cavernosa is responsible for the erection because of its specialized blood vessels, and the midline corpus spongiosum that prevents urethral compression during erection. It has a root, body, and glands. The root attaches to the pubic arc. The body is the visible pendant portion, while the glans is the distal end of the corpus spongiosum. The loose fold of skin covering the glans is a prepuce, which is the skin removed by circumcision. And that is about all of the male reproductive system.
After I've learned about the parts and process involved in the male reproductive system, let's move forward to understanding the female counterpart, the female reproductive system. We'll first begin by discussing the external parts, diving to their internal parts and processes. Starting with the mons pubis, a rounded mound of fatty tissue that covers the pubic bone. It serves significance for sexual attraction, as it contains oil-secreting glands that release pheromones. Next is the labia majora, that literally translate to large lips. They're the two folds of skin with fleshy folds of tissue that enclose and protect the other external genital organs. Following the labia majora, the labia minora, or the small lips, which are small that only span at 2 inches wide. During sexual stimulation, the blood vessels become engorged with blood, causing the labia minora to swell and become more sensitive to stimulation. Next is the clitoris, located in the labia minora at the upper end, which is a small protrusion that corresponds to the penis in the male. It is a counterpart of the penis. It is very sensitive to sexual stimulation that erects when aroused. Below that is the urethra, about 4 to 6 centimeters long and 6 millimeters wide. Has the sole purpose of conducting urine from the bladder to the outside of the body and is located at the top of the vaginal opening. Hymen lies at the opening of the vagina. It is a thin fold of mucous membrane that varies in shape. After the rupture of the hymen, the small rounded elevation that remains are known as the carunculae hymenalis. The opening of the vagina is called introitus. The vaginal opening is the entryway for the penis during sexual intercourse, the exit for blood during menstruation, the baby during birth, and also when stimulated. The Bartholin gland located beside the vaginal opening secrete a thick fluid that supplies lubrication for intercourse. Additionally, the blood supply and the nerve supply of the female external genital organs are similar to those supplying corresponding structure in the male. Moving inside the female reproductive system, we'll meet one of the most known part of it, the vagina. It is where the penis is inserted during sexual intercourse, and it's known as the passageway for sperm to the egg. It is also the passageway for menstrual bleeding and delivering a baby during childbirth. The uterus, a thick-walled muscular pear-shaped organ located in the middle of the pelvis. Its primary function is to sustain a developing fetus. In adults, the uterus is 3 inches long, 2 inches wide, and 1 inch thick, but enlarged 4 to 5 times during pregnancy. The uterus has 3 parts: the fundus, located at the top of the uterus, the body, the usual site for implantation of the blastocytes, and the cervix, the lower part of the uterus linking it with the vagina. Unlike the other parts, the cervix has 3 additional layers: the peritoneum, the myometrium, and the endometrium. However, in contrast with the others, the myometrium serves significant during pregnancy. It aids in expelling the fetus during childbirth through hypertrophy and hyperplasia of its cells. After the uterus is the fallopian tube. Females have 2 fallopian tubes, which are 4 to 5 inches long, extending from the upper edge of the uterus towards the ovaries. The uterus do not directly connect with the ovaries. Instead, the end of the tube flares into the funnel-shaped finger-like extension or fimbriae. When an egg is released from an ovary, the fimbriae guide the egg into the relatively large opening of the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube are lined with tiny hair-like projections, cilia. The cilia and the muscle in the tube's wall propel an egg downward through the tube to the uterus. The fallopian tube is the usual site of fertilization of the egg by the sperm. And lastly, ovaries, which is also known as the female gonads. The ovaries are also called womb. They are small, oval-shaped glands that are located on the either side of the uterus. The ovaries have 2 main reproductive functions in the body. They produce oocytes or eggs for fertilization, and they produce the productive hormones estrogen and progesterone. The ovaries are involved in two different cycles, the ovarian cycle and the menstrual cycle. The ovarian cycle governs the preparation of the endocrine tissue and the release of eggs, while the menstrual cycle governs the preparation and maintenance of the uterine lining. This cycle occurs concurrently and coordinated over a 22 to 32 day cycle, with an average length of 28 days. But what happens during menstrual cycle? Menstru means monthly, which led to the term menstrual cycle. Females of reproductive age, beginning anywhere from 11 to 16 years of age, experience cycle of hormonal activity that repeat at about 1 month intervals. With every cycle, a woman's body prepares for a potential pregnancy, whether or not that is the woman's intention. The average menstrual cycle takes about 28 days and occurs in phases. These phases include the follicular phase, development of the egg, the ovulatory phase, release of the egg, and the luteal phase. Hormone levels decrease if the egg does not implant. The follicular phase pertains to the egg development phase. This phase starts in the first day of the woman's period. It involves two different hormones, the follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and luteinizing hormones, LH. Both are released from the pituitary gland and travel in the blood to the ovaries. These hormones stimulate the growth of about 15 to 20 eggs in the ovaries, each in its own shell, called a follicle. These also trigger the increase of the production of female hormone estrogen. The follicular phase progresses. One follicle in one ovary becomes dominant and continues to mature. This dominant follicle suppresses all of the other follicles in the group. As a result, they stop growing and die. The dominant follicle continues to produce estrogen. Next is the ovulatory phase or ovulation, which usually starts about 14 days after the follicular phase started, but this can vary. The ovulation phase falls between follicular phase and luteal phase. Most women will have menstrual period 10 to 15 days after the ovulation. During this phase, the following events occur. The rise of estrogen from the dominant follicles trigger a surge in the amount of luteinizing hormone. This causes the dominant follicle to release its egg from the ovary. As the egg is released, it is captured by finger-like projections on the end of the fallopian tube, fimbriae. For 1 to 5 days before ovulation, many women will notice an increase in egg white cervical mucus. This mucus is the vaginal discharge that helps to capture and nourish sperm on its way to meet the egg for fertilization. It is now followed by the luteal phase. It begins right after the ovulation. Once the egg is released, the empty ovarian follicles develop into a new structure called corpus luteum. The corpus luteum secretes the hormone estrogen and progesterone. The progesterone prepares the uterus for fertilized egg to implant. If conception happens, the fertilized egg will travel through the fallopian tube to implant in the uterus and pregnancy begins. However, if the egg is not fertilized, it passes through the uterus and the lining breaks down and sheds. This is now the beginning of the next menstrual cycle. But did you know, girls are born with over 1 million egg cells, but only 400 are released during lifetime of menstrual cycle. During fetal life, there are about 6 million to 7 million eggs. From this time, no new eggs are produced. At birth, there are approximately 1 million eggs by the time of puberty. Only about 300,000 remains. Only 300 to 400 would be ovulated during a woman's reproductive lifetime. And that concludes the female reproductive system. Congratulations! Now you have a clear understanding of how reproduction works. Remember, the reproductive system is important in the continuity of the human species. Without it, we would not be able to pass down our knowledge to future generations, because without them, how we will be able to reproduce? And also, Remember that studying the reproductive system is not something to be shunned about. It is important in aiding and exploring the complexity of the human body.
1 a.m., eyes closed, I'm slowly falling to the music and the atmosphere. Now and then, I feel lights fading